I decided to do the event at the Cenotaph because it fitted perfectly with the fact that my dad had been killed on just after D-Day in 1944, 70 years before, and I just wanted our family to have a commemoration and to remember him and his sacrifice. Although I never knew him, of course, because I was born 3 months after he was killed, and my brother, who was nearly 5 at the time, still has no memories of him because my dad had been in the war, in the army throughout the war. So we just wanted to be able to remember him, think about him, see his pictures, talk about him, and just generally speaking, think about what he and the guys who died with him died for, and to remember him personally by reading the letters that he'd sent back home during the 10 days he actually was in Normandy before he was killed. So, you know, all of those things came together, and I was absolutely delighted that the English Heritage Organisation agreed with me straight away that I could have the Cenotaph for an hour for our own personal commemoration for my dad. And as they told me at the time, it was very unusual to have a commemoration of that kind for an individual soldier. Obviously, every year in November on the 11th at 11 a.m., we all support what goes on there, and we all want to remember the sacrifice of the 1.5 million who died in the 2 World Wars. But on this occasion, it was very special. My dad was born in Ireland in 1912. He came to London around about the time of the First World War, and they lived in southeast London. He was a craftsman. He was a hot metal compositor, a member of the old London Society of Compositors, and in the year before the war he'd done a summer frame, as it was, on the old Daily Herald newspaper. Soon after that he joined the army because he was a committed anti-fascist actually. He joined the territorials, he wasn't conscripted, and he spent 4 years nearly of the war training troops. He was a lance sergeant in the Royal Artillery. And when he finally went to Normandy, he was a battery commander in the Royal Artillery, and he was in charge of this battery of anti-tank operatives. That's what he actually did at that time. But prior to that, he'd been training troops, and prior to the war, he and my mum had been very active in the anti-fascist movement. They'd been horrified at the growth of Hitler. They were really upset when they saw the growth of the black shirts and so on London streets, and my dad actually took part in at least one of the battles against them. And also during that period they were very strong supporters of the Aid for Spain movement, and they turned over a couple of rooms of their home to raise money, food, clothing to send to the Republicans in Spain. And they also helped with the bringing over of Spanish children from the Republican areas, refugees, to Britain for their safety. So they were very involved in all that. And so when the war came, and when 1944 came, and my dad said, well, I've been training these guys all through the war, and lots of them have gone out, and taken part in the action. It's now time for me to go with the last lot. And my mum, despite the fact that she had a nearly 5-year-old son and was 6 months pregnant, said, fine, yeah, that's what we believe. Take care, make sure nothing happens to you, off you go. So he went, and he was only actually in Normandy for 10 days. He landed on the 22nd of June, and on the 8th of July, he wrote a letter to my mum that morning, and then was engaged in part of Operation Charnwood, as it was known, which was the battles that liberated Caen. Actually, the capital of Normandy was liberated on the very day that my dad was killed, and that he took part in that battle.
That very morning he had written a letter to my gran and my Uncle Max, who was nearly 5. On the 8th of the 7th, 44, he wrote, "It won't be long before we are together again. If Jerry was a decent sport, he would know he was beaten and pack it in now. I'm still feeling fine and getting along all right. Don't worry about me. This job isn't so difficult after all. I've had much tougher times on schemes. Well, darling, I must close now. Look after yourself and keep happy. All my love to my own 2 darlings. Yours and Max's, Bill.
So, as the letter from his commanding officer to my mum said, when he wrote to tell her he'd been killed, it was a great sacrifice, but it had been a very successful operation. So that's how it was in the end.
Ours was a hard task and the troop did a grand job, but we paid a high price in the loss of your husband and some of his pals. We have some consolation in that their sacrifice was not in vain and that the whole operation was a success. Bill was buried with his pals who fell with him by our padre, and we held a memorial service today. Please accept my heartfelt sympathy for yourself and little son. May God bless you both.
Yeah, it's very moving. I've been going to his war grave since I've been a kid. I mean, I've been many, many times, and we've always paid our respects, and he's been a big kind of missing part of our family. But this is quite a big deal, you know, and I know it means a lot to my dad because he never knew him. You know, it's big, yeah.
I visited the grave as a teenager with my parents. First time I ever saw my father cry. But now as a parent, I think you have a completely different appreciation of how hard it was for my grandfather to go to war and to be out there with his wife pregnant, a small child at home, my father, and for Grandma to be left behind. I mean, she was an extremely strong woman, and she had to be. She had to survive that.
When you see all the graves and the ages of the guys that died, you know, it brings home, you know, what they fought for and stuff. And to be allowed this little opportunity is, yeah, it's nice for the family, really nice.
And I think it's really important for family history to be passed down, and so the children will have a memory of it as well.
I mean, I found out more about what happened to my great-granddad when my great-grandma died, and we found a load of letters that he'd written to her and that were about what happened and the letter that they received when they found out that he died.
What I really liked about it was so personal. It was our family and it was us together. It was lovely. Felt nice.
Of course, I'm incredibly grateful to my family for supporting me in the triathlon trial that I'm going to go through. I'm also incredibly grateful to them for supporting me in the idea of having the ceremony at the Cenotaph. My brother has backed it all the way through and of course read the letter from my dad's commanding officer, and I thank him very much for that. And also for my two lovely granddaughters, Emily and Jane, who read as well at the Cenotaph. Their role was very, very important. Indeed, as was my son Simon and my niece Tanya, who also read letters that my dad had sent back from France. So the family was very solid and supportive, and that's been very important all the way through, but important in terms of our own cohesiveness and, you know, retaining our memories, but also important in terms of encouraging me to get on, do the triathlon, do it as well as I can, and raise as much money as I can so that other kids that have gone through a lot worse than we ever did can get some support and sustenance. Even though to this very day, at the age of 70, I still feel the loss of my dad, and I still want to remember him, and I still want him, his sacrifice and the sacrifice of his friends and colleagues and soldiers that he died with, to be remembered.